Good morning and welcome everybody to the Health Transformation webinar. Really excited to be with you guys today. And this is your host, Cade Archibald. And this is going to be an awesome webinar today. We're going to be diving into some specifics on balancing blood sugar, weight, and increasing your energy. All with some different tactics and just some awesome stuff. So good morning, everybody. Hey, Ardith. Thank you guys for joining us. So Regan's just finishing up with a patient. So we're going to get started here, and then he might be able to jump in. He may be a little overoccupied. So I'm going to get things started. So before we jump in, I want to let you guys know about some really cool stuff we have coming up in Salt Lake, September 6th. I think it's September 6th. It's a Friday. We have first ever full day retreat. Reagan's going to be there. We have some of our medical team, some other of the acupuncturists. We're going to be doing education style. And I'll show you a little bit about it real quick here. I'll share my screen so you guys can see this. It should be a really cool event. So if you haven't had a chance to get registered for this, very, very low cost. We got a huge, I think it's $700 off on it right now. But you can come hang out with our Salt Lake team, some of the health coaches, go through some exercise movements, go through some meditation, mindfulness practice, learn about a deep dive into keto and nutrition, fasting, timed eating, and then you'll actually be able to create your own meals with a really good chef. So there you'll be hands-on learning and cooking, and then you cook what you eat. And then the back half of the day, you'll be getting some really, really good healing sessions in. You'll get acupuncture, get some ozone treatments, and learn a little bit more on SIBO and some digestive health treatments. And then if you'd like, there's even opportunities to get some regenerative medicine treatments while you're there. And so it's going to be a really, really cool event. So if you haven't had a chance, we still got a couple seats left. Reach out to the office and make sure you get signed up for that. That's in downtown Salt Lake, just off 9th South and West Temple. It's going to be a very cool event. So I wanted to dive into topic today. We're going to be talking about so balancing your blood sugar and how you can really maximize your your overall health, your energy levels, everything with the right. Sorry, I'm trying to get something pulled up here and it is just not cooperating. So one supplement that we've found to be extremely helpful, and you can look up more details on this at einsteinsmedicine.com. That's Einstein's, all spelled out, no apostrophe, medicine.com. So you guys, this is a really, really cool formula. So I got it right here in front of me. I take this at least twice a day, morning and night. If I have a chance, I try to do it in the afternoon, especially if I'm not able to, if for some reason the day's going crazy, I didn't prepare a lunch and I'm just working through lunch, I can grab this. This helps keep my blood sugar stabilized so that I don't have a crash and I'm running out of energy. At the same time, if you have, if you're, maybe I eat not an ideal meal for my blood sugar, maybe too many carbs, or maybe I have a bowl of ice cream, heaven forbid. uh, I'll take some energy multiplier. It helps with stabilizing your blood sugar. So it's got berberine. It's one of the best herbs. It's a bark herb that is really good with stabilizing your blood sugar. Fenugreek fruit, American ginseng, so great on the energy side. Gymnema, a really cool thing about gymnema, this is a really cool herb that helps with satiation from sugar. And so we've actually had in the past, I don't think we have them on the front desk right now, but if you come into our office, you can ask us about this. But we can do gymnema droplets on your tongue. And then if you eat something sweet or sugary right after, it neutralizes that sweetness. So if you got a really bad sweet tooth, gymnema is great for helping kind of curb those cravings, as well as it makes things, it kind of dulls that sense of sweetness and reduces that craving or desire. So really cool construct there. Some cinnamon extract. And there's some really good formula here. And so tactically wise, so the 3 ways to really explode your energy, get your body in a better state so it can lose weight, and those different things. So step number 1 would be how you start the day. So you've heard us talked about timed eating, where you want to focus on consuming food and being in a metabolic process between 8 and 10 hours a day. That's where you're going to get the maximum amount of that's just the ideal time frame. You can push it up to 12 hours. But you don't want to have a longer window than like 12 hours of eating. So that would mean if I have breakfast at 8, so if I break my fast, at 8, I don't want to eat anything after 8 p.m. So that's like your bare minimum, your bare minimum there. Oh, great. Looks like Regan was able to join us today and just got done with the patient. Regan, how you doing?
Oh, really good. Sorry, I'm slow.
It's all right. I just bored everybody for the last 10 minutes. Luckily, it doesn't look like anyone's dropped off, so maybe it was a little more entertaining than I thought. I was just going through some strategies on maximizing energy, blood sugar, and getting your body in a better state. So talking about timed eating, maximum 12 hours, but you got some good slides.
Yes, and thanks. I noticed you had the energy multiplier. Did you go through that at all, Cade?
I went through a few of the supplement or the ingredients in it.
Okay.
But I was just telling them strategy wise, going into some tactics of having a general range should be no more than 12 hours of an eating window, but then ideally about 8 to 10 max.
Yep. Beautiful.
If you're really trying to lose some weight and increase your insulin sensitivity.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and let's, one of the things I wanted to cover today is, and I apologize, that patient was from Montana and drove a long ways to see us. And so I did not, plus he's got farming roots. So we were talking farming. Tell me about the size of a fist that came through and broke a bunch of windows in his house recently. It's interesting, but
wow.
But anyway, let's dive in. So if you look at blood sugar, it's one of the most critical things you can do for your health. I tell people, before you get all crazy in your detoxes and your cleanse and getting on a specific diet, let's make sure your blood sugar is managed properly, because you know how it feels when you have hanger, Cade. Have you ever been hangry?
I've never experienced hanger.
I've seen you a few times on the verge of hanger, and usually you get a little road rage. And so
it's not pretty.
It's not pretty at all. So you got to feed the big bad bear in your body. Yeah. And so,
well, has everyone seen those Snickers commercials where they talk about the diva? Like, and
Oh, yeah.
the person will like morph into like a totally different person, and they're all like just totally like, it's crazy how food controls us, because that commercial is hilarious because it's partially true. Like people, like especially with kids, when they don't like, I can tell when my kids need food because they're like just crazy.
It's wild. And that all deals with blood sugar, like our bodies. And if we, if we can change the cellular behavior, your energy levels, ideally, we want to be nice and balanced. You want mental clarity all throughout the day. But if you look at it, one of the things that happens when our blood sugar is all over the place, you get high blood sugar, and then you have high insulin, and then insulin pulls all of the sugar out of the blood into the cells. And then what happens is you get this overwhelm in your beta cells. Like your pancreas, not only do you get more inflammation in your blood vessels, but your pancreas, because it has to produce insulin all the time, it goes into overwhelm, and then you have beta cell death. And there's two types of.
I love the picture they used for beta cell death.
Yeah, you like that
Like
one?
the dead guy spray painted on the ground.
Yeah, it's like game over. And so beta cells they're the cells in your pancreas that produce insulin. And so if you continually put your pancreas under undue amounts of pressure, that's why you can get type 1 diabetes as an adult or as a teenager. One of the reasons is because your beta cells just keep dying. So there's two types of, there's type 1, there's type 2 in diabetes, and there's even a 1.5. And 1.5 diabetes is where you have the beta cells that are dying, and you also have insulin resistance. And so what insulin resistance is that's when you actually have the inability to take sugar into the cells. And one of the things that you'll find is high glucose levels is very toxic to your beta cells. So my Japanese teacher, she used to say the greatest sin you can ever put on your body is overeating. And so overeating is one of the worst things you can do. And even if you're diabetic, and there's a need for insulin, the problem is if you're eating all the crazy refined sugars, and if you're not getting yourself on more of a healthy fat-based, healthy protein, healthy carbohydrate-based diet, more of like a keto green, then what's going to happen is when you have that spike of sugar, then you have to put the insulin in, and taking endogenous or exogenous insulin is actually very toxic to your body. And so one of the things that happens is the higher your glucose levels get, the more beta cells you're killing off. And especially if you're type 2 diabetic, a lot of our patients, they'll tell us, they'll say, well, Regan, my blood sugar is fine. My doctor looked at my labs and everything looks great. I'm 6.8. And I said, yeah, but what if you're off the medication? What do your numbers show? And they're like, oh yeah. And so I don't rely on the numbers when you're on medication. We want to get your hemoglobin A1C down to closer to about 5.0 to 5.4 is a sweet spot. In some cases, even down to 4.9. But if you have labs in front of you and you can look at those, just look at your numbers real quick and see where you're hovering. Next time you're in the office here in Salt Lake, we do have a hemoglobin A1C machine. And so it's a simple 5-minute test. We just do a little finger stick and then put it in our machine, and we can tell you what your hemoglobin A1C is. So let's talk about kind of the mechanism. So ideally, you want insulin, and insulin carries the blood sugar the sugar out of the blood into the cells. And then that glucose molecule travels on this chain of potassium. And that potassium chain opens up that receptor. So if you don't have potassium in your body, that receptor will stay closed. But the potassium opens up the receptor, and then you can swallow up that glucose. And that's how you can use it as energy. And so that's in a healthy individual who has healthy beta cells that can produce the insulin. And then that's where you have the receptors on the cells that can take in the insulin. And so one of the things that gets in the way of you taking in the insulin and using the glucose as energy, because that's the key, is if you don't use the glucose as energy as quickly as possible, it's going to get converted into a fat cell. and then those fat cells just accumulate and they can become very toxic to your body. And so the beautiful thing about it is if you have enough potassium in your diet, that's where you can really mitigate a lot of damage here. And not just potassium, but you also need your selenium, you need your zinc, you need your copper. These things also influence some of the potassium levels, as does magnesium and calcium. Those are some of the major ones. So, Cade, what are some foods that have high levels of potassium in it that you like?
Probably my favorite would be avocado. Avocado, a good size avocado, it's close to 750 to 1,000 milligrams of potassium.
Yeah, big avocado, it's 1,000. Yep.
And most people think bananas are like a good source of potassium. It's like 160 milligrams.
Right. Yeah.
And you got a lot of starches. That's going to like shoot your blood sugar up. And it's not adequate enough potassium to really help stabilize that. Whereas avocado's got a lot of good omega fats.
Yep.
And it's really good stabilizer for blood sugar.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think avocados are great. If you look at salmon is actually loaded with potassium. There's 600 milligrams of potassium per serving. You look at your leafy greens. Any leafy greens that you're eating is going to have a huge amounts of magnesium, which is great because that helps influence the potassium ratios in your body. But there's also a good, healthy abundance of potassium. Potatoes have a lot of potassium in them as well. Sweet potatoes are a great, easy way to get some resistant starch in your body and then also get some good potassium. So here's what happens in type 1 if you don't have enough potassium. Your pancreas does not produce the insulin, so you don't have the beta cells, and then you just have the glucose circulating in your blood, and that becomes very toxic. Glucose that's not absorbed into the cells becomes, it creates inflammation. And then as your body starts storing those as fat, that's where you end up with ketones. And this is a different type of ketone. This is where you can almost, it smells sweet on someone's breath when a diabetic has too much, their blood sugar is just through the roof because they've got no insulin. And it can put them in a coma, into a seizure, very toxic to the brain. Type 2 diabetics, this is where you have insulin production from your pancreas, but the problem is you don't have the glucose receptor sites that are open. They failed to respond to the insulin. Insulin's knocking on the door and saying, hey, we got sugar for you. We're going to feed the beast. We're going to feed the mitochondria and really light up your engine with this glucose. You can start your Krebs cycle. And the cell says, no way, you can't come in because we've got no receptivity. There's nothing that will trigger that door. You need the key to unlock it, and that key to unlocking it is having proper health in between your cells. And so this is where glutathione, we use glutathione in all of our type 2 diabetics, and that helps clean up the debris between the cells. The other thing that we've done is we've gotten rid of inflammation, and we can do this in two ways. One way is we put them on a liver cleanse and really get the body deeply cleansed, and we'll be going through this in more detail over the next few weeks. But the other thing that we've done is we've done stem cell infusions, and what the stem cell infusions do is they remodulate the immune system and they help the cells behave differently. It's like putting new life into your body, and so the cells start vibrating and sending signals at a different rate. I just met with one of our patients just on Monday, and what he said is over the course of a year, he was full-blown insulin dependent, and within 6 months, he cut his medications down 80%. Now he is off, it's been a year now, he's off insulin, he's still on metformin. His blood sugar is average, his hemoglobin A1C was 6.0. And when we first tested it, it was 8.9. So he's doing awesome. So there's been some very cool case studies that we've seen in our diabetic patients. And he made some dietary changes, but he said, look, I don't want to, I'm not going to do them all. I'm a grown man. He's in his 70s. He just, he's lost about 20 pounds. We got him working out more, but stem cells really have helped him. He's done it every 3 months, and he gets better and better and better. So very fascinating to see that. All right, Cade, any comments on the difference between type 1 and type 2, or hopefully everybody understands the difference between beta cells and insulin resistance?
Nothing's coming in at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that, so what's the biggest difference between the insulin cells is what pushes it, helps the cell absorb glucose. So what's the beta cell?
So the beta cell it's a cell type in the pancreas.
Got it.
And so the beta cell, how cells have exosomes that send out signals, and then they also can create hormones, and then they send out the hormones. Well, beta cells, one of the main function is they're creating new insulin. And the problem is one of the chief ingredients, the raw materials they use to create insulin is they use bile from your gallbladder. And bile kind of emulsifies fat, and so they use the fatty acid. Your beta cells use fatty acids to actually produce the insulin. And so a lot of our patients who have no gallbladders end up with type 2 diabetes because of that.
Wow.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So yeah, great question there. Okay, so let's move on. This is going to get a little more technical, and if you guys are entering into snooze fest land, and let me know, but I know a lot of you are very academic. You love learning about how your body works. But one of the mechanisms, once the glucose docks on those receptor sites, what researchers have looked at, they say, well, where does the glucose go? So yeah, it's on the receptor site. And how does that glucose actually migrate down and become like energy for the cell? And so what happens is there's this receptor, it's called a GLUT4 transporter. And GLUT4 comes from the surface of the cell. It migrates up to the cell membrane, and it's able to capture the glucose. And then that's where the glucose goes into a metabolic state, or it goes into storage to be used later. And so very interesting, because what you find is the more receptive your GLUT4, the more activity you have in your GLUT4 transporters are, the less likely that you will develop or any blood sugar issues. And so how do you get your GLUT4 transporters increased? And the main way is exercise. And so it's very interesting. There's lots of studies. If you go to PubMed, or you just go type in Google GLUT4 receptors, diabetes, and exercise, you'll see some very interesting studies. Because here's what happens is the GLUT4 transporters, they travel to the surface of the cell. They take glucose from the insulin into the mitochondria. And then what happens is when they ignore the insulin knocking on the door, this is when you become insulin resistant. So GLUT4 says, look, we can't hear you because there's not enough nutrients, there's too much inflammation, we're not coming up to grab that glucose, so sorry, take it away, we don't want it. Even a type 1 diabetic can also become insulin resistant. This is what a lot of people don't realize, is type 1 diabetics, the last thing you want to have happen is where that insulin, even though you're pumping insulin into your body, that insulin doesn't take the glucose into the cells. That's when you go into a major metabolic crisis, and that's a scary place to be. And so what this means is, yes, the pancreas isn't producing the insulin, but then your cells don't take the glucose in, even if you have insulin put into your body. So very interesting. There's also a GLUT1 receptors, and these transporter, and these transporters help take they move the insulin moves through the blood-brain barrier, and it can get into the heart as well. The GLUT2, those work primarily in moving insulin through the liver, the pancreas, and the small intestine. Because remember, everybody needs every part of your body needs insulin. One of the main nootropics or brain treatments we do is intranasal insulin. And Cade, you've done intranasal insulin. You've done it after your stem cell procedures, and what's been your experience with that?
Yeah, I would just say really mental clarity. I wouldn't even necessarily say maybe a little slight boost of energy, but I would just say kind of clears some cobwebs.
Yep. Yeah, and so what happens is we'll have you do a nasal mist in your brain, and this is usually after we've treated your your brain with stem cells, but you can do the intranasal insulin whether you've had stem cells or not. And you can typically buy like Novolin over the counter and just do a spray in each nostril. There's been lots of studies on safety. It will not affect your blood sugar. But still check your blood sugar. And if you feel like for some reason it goes off, then stop. But it's interesting because the insulin is so important. And these GLUT3 receptors, for example, that's what takes the insulin right into the brain, the neurons, and it also gets into the testes for the sperm. And then the GLUT4 is what we talked about, and that's specific for the skeletal muscles, the adipose tissue, and the heart. So one of the key ingredients, the chief components of keeping your blood sugar regulated is making sure all the transporters. So it's not just about getting the insulin from the blood or the sugar from the blood into the cells, but it's also about getting the transporters to take that insulin out of the receptors and bringing it down into the mitochondria of your brain cells, your neurons, your liver cells, your pancreas cells, your heart cells, your muscle cells, and skeletal system. So it's a very complex system. So the more you exercise, if you see this, the more GLUT4 receptors come to the surface and take glucose in without the need for beta cells functioning and making insulin. So you can have a lot of sugar in your blood, and that's why if you eat dessert at night, you need to go on a walk. You need to get some kind of exercise so that you don't have a bunch of insulin that gets secreted into your blood, because what's going to happen is that insulin level is going to drop as you're sleeping, and then your blood sugar will get too low and it will wake you up at night, or you're going to have to urinate. So if you can exercise after you've eaten sugar, then the glucose can be utilized without the need of insulin, which is really interesting. Those transporters will come up and they'll start just snarfing up the insulin because the receptor sites will still be open and they'll be calling in the glucose as much as possible. And then as the GLUT4 transporters get activated, you don't need the insulin, which is great. Weight training, one of the things the studies show is that the more muscle you have, the more you'll eat up glucose in a 24-hour period. So you want your pancreas sleeping. You don't want the beta cells to overwork, as you saw. Overwhelmed beta cells lead to a dead pancreas and lead to diabetes. So hope you guys learned something today. It was very a little academic, but hopefully you enjoyed it. I really appreciate you guys joining us today and come in and get your hemoglobin A1C checked.
Awesome. And then head on over to einsteinsmedicine.com. That's where you can pick up Energy Multiplier and experience that. That's one of the little hacks I've really enjoyed. And then, like I mentioned at the beginning, in Salt Lake, downtown Salt Lake, right off of 9th South and West Temple, got an amazing retreat coming up September 6th. Got a couple seats left, so do not hesitate. Laura, thank you so much for your shout out there. Regan, you got to give Laura Besser a shout.
Hey, Laura. Yay.
She said, Laura in the house.
Laura, come to the retreat September 6th.
So, love you guys. Thank you so much for being on today, Regan. You guys have an amazing week. We'll be back same time, same place next week. See you, everybody.
Bye-bye.